Alright guys, so now we're going to be making this scene right here. So basically there are a few variations of the scene, and we're also going to be making an animation. However, this is going to be the set that we're going to be building, and after that you can make any of these renders. It basically comes down to your preference, or you can make all of them if you want. Anyways, so yeah, let's begin with this. So firstly, I'm just going to be opening Unreal Engine. And I'm just going to be opening a project which I already have created because I have imported assets into that project. However, you can feel free to just create a new games project, a blank games project. Be sure to turn on ray tracing if you have an RTX graphic card, an NVIDIA RTX graphic card. Otherwise, if you don't, then it's fine. However, do note that the quality might be a little worse. And apart from that, be sure to set it to blueprints and quality preset, set it to maximum. You can name it whatever you want, and then you can just create this project. However, I'm just going to be opening this one right here, because I already do have some assets imported. Speaking of assets, we are going to be needing one asset pack. So I'm just going to be opening the Epic Games Launcher. Now this Epic Games Launcher is basically what you used to install Unreal Engine. So I'm pretty sure you have it. Just open it, and then also Unreal Engine has also opened. Just wait for the Epic Games Launcher to open. So once you're in the launcher, you can simply go to the marketplace. And here, I'm just going to be searching for, just wait for it to open first. And I'm just going to be searching for automotive and automotive materials, this thing right here. You're just going to download this pack. This is basically created by Epic Games, and it comes with a lot of realistic car textures, which is exactly what we're going to be needed. So we're going to get interior textures and exterior textures as well, which is exactly what we need. So you're just going to download this. The download size, I think, is somewhere around, if I just look at the cache size, it's around 2.9 gigabytes. So I think it's going to be somewhere around 2 gigabytes, the download size, and then it's going to unpack to something like 2.9 gigabytes. So just be sure to have that space, have that much space, and be sure to download it. Anyway, so once you have downloaded this, you can just simply add it to project, and then you can just select whichever project you want to add it to. If your project is from 5.1, it might not show up here. So you're just going to check this thing right here, which says show all projects. Then you can just select it, and then you can select the closest version, 5.0, and then you can add to project. I'm not going to do that because I already do have it added, but yeah, you can go ahead and do that. Anyway, so with Unreal Engine opened, I'm just going to go to File, New Level, and I'm just going to be creating a brand new empty level, and we're going to be starting with this. Press Save All, and just press Ctrl S so that you can save the level as well. I'm just going to name it Lambo 01 _ SS, and I think that should be good. Right. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be firstly importing the car, right? So for the car, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be going to Google Chrome. Now you have a few options of importing the car. Either you can use a 3D model from the internet. So you can search for Lamborghini 3D model free download, or you can obviously download any car which you want. I would actually recommend you to try something else and not just copy the one which I'm using. Yeah. So I think I downloaded this one right here. But yeah, you have a lot of these really cool cars. So you can basically download whichever one you want. Actually, you know what? I might download this one this time because I think this looks a lot more cool. I can download that as well. Or you basically have a lot of these options. You can download Lamborghini Aventador. Yeah, so you have a lot of options. Right, so I'm just going to go to that model and just make sure that it looks good from all angles and it's a realistic model, which it is. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to stick to this one because the problem with that model is the fact that it has a lot of these image textures, which might be a problem to import inside of Unreal Engine. So I'm just going to stick to this one. This one is a pretty easy to import model, so I don't want to confuse you guys. I'm just going to close that. And with this model selected, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be going down to download 3D model, and then you can just download the FBX format. Now I already do have it downloaded, so I'm not going to download that. And also, Sketchfab is not the only website you can get models. You can go to CG Trader. You could go to I think the other one which I used was Free 3D, and yeah. So these three are the main trusted websites which you can use to download models. Just be sure to look at free models if you want free models. Otherwise, you can pay for models as well. Obviously, paid models are going to be a lot better than free models, so just keep that in mind. And we do have an Aventador model right here as well. Anyway, so once you have a model selected, you can just download that. Either download a .obj format or a .fbx format. Those models are going to be the easiest to import inside of Unreal Engine. But anyways, yeah. Also, if you don't want to download a model from here, you can even use Blender to import models. So if you have Blender, then you can just open it. Now, obviously, this is not a Blender tutorial, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. However, what you can do is that you can use add-ons like Blender Kit or add-ons like Transportation add-on to import cars as well. So if you have Blender Kit, you can just search for car or any specific model which you want. I'm just going to go to search filters and I'm going to click free first. And yeah, you have a lot of these really cool models which you can download. Just click them and they're going to come up in your viewport. But yeah, anyways, you have a lot of these options and just you can just choose any one of them. Anyways, so apart from, yeah, I think this one is really good. That's a really cool model, isn't it? We can use that as well, actually. All right, never mind. I think I'm going to stick to that Hurricane. Anyways, so what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to be using the Transportation add-on as well. Yeah, you can use this one as well. So you can just now do note that this add-on is actually paid. So just be sure to buy it if you want to get it. And it comes with a lot of cars and a lot of bikes and boats and planes and stuff like that. But yeah, you can get a lot of these really cool cars with this add-on as well. But I mean, if you want a very specific car, then I think you're better off just downloading the specific 3D model from the internet because there's a lot more variety on the internet. Yeah, so once you have finalized the model and downloaded it, it's time to open Unreal Engine. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be firstly creating a folder in the content folder right here. Just right click this, create a new folder. I'm just going to name it car SS. And so basically this is going to be the folder in which we're going to be storing the car. And now you can just simply go to wherever you downloaded that car. Right, so now it's time to import the car. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be going to my desktop where I saved that car. And I'm just going to be opening the folder. So Sketchfab models usually come with two folders. One is going to be the source file, the source folder, and the other one is going to be the textures folder. So I don't think we're going to be needing the textures for now. We can obviously use this logo texture if you want. And I'm going to be importing that in just a bit. But before that, I'm just going to be going to my source file, and then we can just import this FBX model right here. And how exactly do we import models? You're going to simply drag this inside of Unreal Engine in the content browser. And so if I just drop it right there, you're going to see that it's going to give us some options. Now, since we're not looking to basically rig this model and animate it, we are going to be making an animation, but it's going to be a camera animation, right? The car is not going to move. So I'm just going to uncheck that skeletal mesh thing. And I'm just going to click import all. And so just wait for it to import. All right, so now the import has been completed and it gave us some errors, but we can just ignore them. And so now we have the car here. You're going to see that we have a lot of these meshes and together they basically make up the car. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be firstly creating a landscape. And the reason why I'm creating a landscape is because so that we have basically a floor to put the car on. And so I'm just going to be going to landscape mode. You can alternatively obviously create a cube or something like that, but I prefer a landscape generally because we don't need to scale it up or anything like that. It just works. And yeah. All right, so once we have a landscape, I'm simply going to be importing the car on the landscape. So I'm just going to be selecting the first asset, the first mesh. I'm going to be going to the end and select the last mesh. Be sure to not select any textures. Shift select the last one so that we basically select all of them. And then you can just select any one of them and just drag them inside of your scene and your car is gonna appear. Just wait for it to sort of compile the textures and everything and it's done. Right now, since we don't have any lighting, you're gonna see that it looks pretty bad. However, now we're gonna be working on the lighting as well. But before that, let me just, you know what I'm gonna do is that I'm simply gonna go to window. I'm gonna go to environment light mixer and I'm just gonna be creating a basic light setup by clicking all these buttons right here so that we have basically like a basic outdoor lighting setup so that we can first texture this car and then we're going to be working on the texture or working on the lighting, which is going to be studio lighting obviously. Right now, one problem which you're going to be noticing with this is that the shadows are too dark. So to fix them, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go down to the skylight and I'm going to click real-time capture. And now you're going to see that it's going to look a lot more realistic, isn't it? All right, another thing which I'm going to be doing is that right now you're going to see that our scene is way too cluttered. We have all these assets just lying around. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting all of them. So just select the first one and shift select the last one of the car asset. And I'm going to be clicking this button right here, which is going to create a new folder with all those assets. So I'm just going to name this Lambo. And we can just collapse this to make our scene a lot more manageable. And I'm going to be selecting all these and I'm just going to name them something like scene. Yeah, because they're related to the scene so that we have a more organized workflow. Anyway, so now I'm assuming that you have basically downloaded that asset pack, which I asked you to download in the start. And so now we can just open this folder right here called automotive materials, and we can start to texture the car. So I'm just going to be opening this. I'm going to go down to the materials folder, and I'm going to go down to the exterior folder now. And so basically you're going to have a lot of these categories which you can just choose and you can just start applying the textures. So the first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting this car paint and I'm going to be adding a car paint. Now you have a lot of these options. So the one which I'm going to be choosing is maybe something like this, car paint red. I did make it black last time, so I'm going to be maybe making it red this time. Although it doesn't really matter that much which paint you choose, because you can obviously change the color later on. So for example, you can just simply double click the material to open it, and then you have this base color right here, and then you can basically make it whichever color you want. So I think that's good. And yeah, so I'm just going to be applying this to all the places where there should be the body color. Now in this, for example, if you're confused with some part of because whether it has like a texture or not, you can just simply search for references. You can just search for Lamborghini Huracan or whichever model or whichever car you are using, and then you can just take references from that and you can just color your car accordingly. I think this part is pretty fun, although it does get a little repetitive sometimes. So you can just be sure to maybe put on some good music or something like that, and then you can just get it done. The back. And so since we don't have any pictures from the back, I'm just going to be searching for Lamborghini Huracan back. And so now we have a clear understanding of where every color is going to go. This part is black, right? I was going to make it that same color, but okay. So for this part, which is below this thing, I'm just going to make it maybe something like, I'm just going to go to my metal category, and then we can just give it any of the colors which you want. So how about this metal bump? I think it's good. I think it's going to look good. Also, if you want to make these bumps larger, what you can do is you can basically make this texture tile a lot less. So how exactly do you do that? You simply open the material by double clicking it, and then you can just go down to this tiling, and this tiling you can just basically change the value of the tiling, and the lower you set this value, the less it's going to tile and the larger your texture is going to become. So instead of 60, how about we set it to something like 30 and 30. Now you're going to see that these bumps are going to be a lot more visible, which is exactly what you want. So it's perfect. All right. And then let me just apply it to this as well. Now you can obviously change all these textures later on if you don't like them, but I think for now they are looking pretty good. The inside part as well, I'm just going to make it black. Perfect. And these exhausts, just be sure to give them like a nice glossy texture, maybe something like that. Yeah. And these parts as well. And so I think the back part is done. How about this patch on the side? I think it's a light, so I'm just gonna give it this black material for now. We might change it later on, but I think for now it should be fine. And we're gonna come back to the tail lights later. However, now let's go to the front and let's apply this car body material to this part as well, and to the side mirrors as well, of course. Just make sure that the side mirrors are of the same color. Yes, they are. And the other one. All right, perfect. I think we're done with that. Let me just do the front grills. And I'm going to be using that same black material which we previously used. I think it was this one. I think so. No, it was this one, metal bump. Now with this, I would highly recommend you to not copy the exact textures which I'm using. I would recommend you to sort of come up with your own ideas and texture the car slightly in a different manner. Basically the way you like it, just do it in that way. And so the top, 1 second, let me just, yeah, I think this is a correct picture. So we have a mirror, we have sort of like a glass in the middle, and on the sides we have metal. I'm just going to give it this metal texture right here. And this part I think is going to be the glass. So we're going to come back to the glass later on. But first, let me just get done with the body color. I think that should be good. Let's give these the same color as well. All right, that's perfect. Now let's move on to the next step, which is going to be the logo. So for the logo, what I'm going to do is that I'm simply going to be going back to my car folder. Let's go down to car SS. And then in this folder, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to my textures folder, and I'm going to be importing that logo into the car folder. So we basically have this sort of image texture right here. And I'm just going to be dragging this on top of this, and hopefully it should be UV unwrapped, which it is. Yes, it's already UV unwrapped, so that's perfectly fine. One other thing which we can do to sort of make this look a little more realistic is to basically reduce the brightness of this. And the way we can do that is by simply opening this image texture, clicking it twice. And I'm just going to be going to this brightness, and we can maybe make it 0.8. And we can even sort of, I don't think we can increase the contrast, can we? Yeah, we can't really increase the contrast. We can, however, increase the saturation. So I'm just going to do that slightly. And so I think that looks pretty good. Once we start working on the lighting, it's going to look a lot better. So don't worry about that. Let's make sure that we don't have any normal textures of this. Yeah, we don't. Anyways, I'm just going to go back to my Unreal Engine. Yeah, so let's work on the tires for now. So for the tires, we simply have these materials under the rubber category, under the rubber folder. I think I'm going to be using these rubber rough. I think that looks pretty good. You can also use these tire tread material. However, these are meant for the cars which don't already have these bumps, these treads on the tires. But since we already do have them, I don't think we need them. And you can even add a shiny material if you want. Yeah, you can basically just choose whichever material you want, but I think this one works the best for it. So I'm just going to apply this material to all the tires, and then we're going to move on to this inner rims part. All right, so for these rims, I'm simply going to be adding a black rim to this. You can obviously you can obviously set it to whichever color you want, but I think a black one should do the job for me. So I'm just going to go back to my metal folder, and I think this metal bump should work fine. I think that looks good. Obviously, we can change it later on if you want. And these discs, how about I make these discs a little lighter? Because maybe something like that. I think that's going to add some contrast to the tires, which I think is going to make it look a lot better. And how about we make this inner part? I don't know what this is called. I think these are the brakes, I think, but I'm not exactly sure. How about we give them this gold texture, just to add some contrast? I think that looks pretty good. And now it's time for these screws, so I'm just going to make them black as well. Now right now you're going to see that since we have auto exposure turned on in Unreal Engine, the image is basically adjusting brightness on its own, and that's not something which I like. I like to have sort of like a constant exposure. So to fix that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to Add. I'm going to go down to Visual Effects and Post-Process Volume, and I'm just going to be adding a Post-Process Volume, and you can just move it down just away from the scene so that it doesn't bother us. However, in the details panel, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be searching for infinite, and I'm just going to be checking this infinite extend unbound thing. Now what this is going to do is that this is going to make sure that the post-process volume affects the whole scene. Otherwise it would only affect our camera when it is inside this post-process volume, this box right there. Anyway, so once that is done, I'm simply going to go down to exposure, and I'm going to check these two things, metering mode and exposure compensation. Metering mode I'm going to set to manual, and then we can control the exposure using this exposure compensation. So I'm just going to set it to something like 10 or maybe 9. I think 9.5 should be the sweet spot. Yep, I think that looks pretty good. All right. So with that done, I think this looks pretty good. And now you're going to see that wherever we go, the exposure is going to stay constant, which is really good for us because it makes us look at the colors at exactly how they are. I think that looks pretty decent. How about we change this texture right here because it's way too dirty for us. We're basically trying to make this car look new, and it certainly doesn't look very new. I think that's a lot better. Perfect. Also, by the way, guys, if your reflections of your car are not looking that good, be sure to turn on ray tracing. How exactly do you do that? You simply go to your file. Actually, no, I think you go into your edit tab right here. You go down to your project settings and then just wait for it to open. And then you can search for ray tracing in here. And just be sure that inside this Lumen tab, you're going to see that just make sure that this use hardware ray tracing when available, this is turned on, and also this is turned on as well, support hardware ray tracing, and ray trace shadows, ray trace skylight, these are all turned on. Just make sure to turn them on. Also, you can only do this if you have an RTX graphic card. If you don't have them, you might want to, your quality of your scene might be a little less, which I told you in the beginning, but I think that's, I don't think there's a workaround, apart from the fact that you can obviously use path tracing if you want, but the render times of that are going to be a lot higher. Anyways, so also another thing which you can do is that you can basically set your scalability settings to cinematic. So you're going to see that right now they are cinematic. If I set them back to epic, you're going to see that the reflections are going to be slightly worse. Obviously, it's not going to be that visible, but they are going to be slightly worse. So I'm just going to go to settings and engine scalability settings. Just be sure to set these to cinematic. They're just going to make your scene look a little bit better, especially in the glass part. I'm going to be showing you the difference in just a second. Anyway, so let me just complete these tires first. Then we can move on to the glass parts. Now this part is going to get a little repetitive, so I apologize for that. And yeah. So also another thing which you want to make sure that you do is you take reference and you take a lot of inspiration from websites like Pinterest and stuff like that. Because if you try to make things from memory, then it's not going to go that well, because obviously your memory is going to lie to you and your things are not going to look that realistic. And then the sad part about that, the sort of scary part about that, is the fact that you don't even realize that something is looking, that why exactly something is looking wrong. It just looks wrong, and then oftentimes you have no idea why exactly does it look wrong. So I would recommend you to just use a lot of reference, especially with scenes like cars and stuff like that. You can just go to Pinterest and then you can maybe search for cars and stuff like that. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. I think that is good. And this inside part is sort of bothering me. Anyways, all right, now let's move on to adding the glass part. So for the glass, what I'm going to do is that I'm simply going to go to the glass folder and we can just add some glass. I'm just going to add a windshield glass. Yeah, now this is the difference between cinematic and epic. So I want you to just look at this for now. If I go back to epic, you're going to see that this looks very fake, doesn't it? If I go back to cinematic, you're going to see that it looks a lot more realistic. Now, one thing which I am going to be noticing, which you must be noticing right now, is the fact that this car is basically empty from inside. And so we're basically not going to be looking at it directly. For example, we're not going to use we're not going to be using a camera angle which goes something like this, from which the car is entirely visible. We're going to be going for something like this, so that the car is not entirely visible from the inside. So yeah, just those are some little tricks that you have to do to sort of hide the imperfections of your renders. Let's apply that. This inside part is white for some reason, so I'm just going to make it red as well. Let's go back to car paint and apply. Now this is the part where I want you guys to sort of take your time and just be patient and just apply all the textures properly, because these textures are going to either make or break your render. Because if your textures are not applied properly, it's a dead giveaway that it's not an actual image and it's a 3D render, which is not something which you want. It's not something which you want other people to think. Anyway, so this part is black, right? Let me just look at a picture from the front. And yeah, this part is black. Got it. And so I'm just going to go back to my metal folder and let's apply the texture. I'm going to apply the same exact texture to the, what do you call him? Oops, my bad. To the windscreen wipers as well. And I think we should be good to go. This part is left, so I'm just going to add that metal texture right here as well. I'm just looking to see if we have anything left. Or we obviously do have these lights left, but I'm going to come back to it in just a second. Making sure that everything else is done. Let's make this black as well. And let's make this logo black as well. Actually, instead of black, I'm just going to make it a shiny silver. Maybe something like that. Yeah, I think that should look good. And this bottom part, I'm going to make this black as well. Metal. All right, now let's go back to our gloss and let's apply a gloss to these lights as well. Now we are going to have to make the texture the insides of the lights as well, but I'm going to do that in just a second. This is supposed to be a mirror, so I'm going to go back to my metal folder, and in here we're going to have this mirror right here. So I'm just going to apply this, and so it's sort of glitching for now. I don't know why that is. I think something like that should be good. Yeah, that should be a good texture. And apply it to this as well. Let's go back to our gloss folder and apply the texture to these front lights as well. Just make sure that everything else is done. Yep. Only the insides of the lights are left. So for this, what I'm going to do is that basically to texture the inside parts of the light, we're going to have to remove this cover, okay? So for that, I want you guys to turn on this movement snapping, because obviously if we just move it randomly, we're not going to be able to place it on the proper location after we're done. So just move it like two snaps ahead, and then we can start to texture the insides. So I'm just going to be applying a metal bump texture to this and these parts as well. Oops. I'm also going to be reducing my camera speed for now. And these are basically the light strips, right? So I'm just going to go to my lights folder, and then I'm going to be applying the lamp white to this. Obviously, this is not going to look that bright for now, so we can obviously just go ahead and increase the facing intensity. Now we are going to be tweaking this later on, so don't worry about it too much. And I'm going to be applying this to these as well. These lights as well. And I think we should be good to go. Now just select the light cover and just move it back in its place. And I think that is done. Now moving on to this part. I'm just going to select this, move it twice. Apply the lights. Material. Also, by the way, just be sure to save your assets and save your project as well, because if Unreal Engine crashes, then you're going to lose all your progress, which is not something which you want. So yeah, just be sure to keep saving your projects incrementally. Let me just finish applying this, and we're done with that. So let's move this back as well. All right, so the front lights are done. Now let's move on to the back lights. Let me increase the camera speed. And so for the backlights, I'm going to be doing the same exact thing. I'm going to be moving the cover a little aside, and I'm going to be applying a metal texture to the back. And with these, to these lights, I'm simply going to be applying the red light material too. And that should be good. And let me put this back on. And that is looking pretty good. And lastly, we have to do the same exact thing with this as well. Metal bump, and we are good to go. I think our texturing is finally complete. Let me just put this back on, and we are finally done with the boring part. Now we can move on to the fun part, which is going to be to set up the whole scene and to render this beauty. Right, so that is done. I'm just going to get rid of this platform for now. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to right click this Lambo folder, and I'm going to select all descendants, so that we basically select all the elements. And then I'm just going to move them slightly down so that they are flushed with the landscape. But I'm going to turn off snapping for this. And I think that should be a good position. Perfect. All right, now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be working on the studio first.